Ma'am, you need to come with us now. You've been asked to leave twice already. The crowded security checkpoint went silent as passengers turned to watch a middle-aged black woman in business casual being physically escorted toward the exit. Marlene didn't struggle or shout. She just kept her hands visible and her voice steady, the way she'd trained hundreds of officers to handle exactly this kind of situation. The lead officer, a young white man whose badge read J. Morrison, had his hand on his radio, already calling for backup like he'd just apprehended someone dangerous. What he didn't know was that Marlene Thompson was the deputy director of terminal operations, and in about 4 minutes, his supervisor's supervisor was going to receive a phone call that would change everything. Marlene Thompson had overseen every security protocol at Hartsfield-Jackson for 7 years, but the two officers gripping her arms thought she was trespassing in her own terminal. Let me take you back 30 minutes. Marlene had arrived at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport at 5:47 a.m. for an early walkthrough of Terminal D. She did this twice a week, unannounced inspections where she dressed like a regular passenger and observed how her staff actually operated when they thought no one important was watching. Today she wore dark jeans, a white button-down, comfortable flats, and her natural hair pulled back in a low bun. No ID lanyard, no airport badge visible, just a leather tote bag with her tablet and files inside. She deliberately left her official credentials in her car. She wanted to see the airport through a passenger's eyes, experience the bottlenecks, notice what worked and what didn't. It was how she'd identified 17 operational improvements in the last 2 years. She'd entered through the main entrance, moved through the pre-security area, and was observing the TSA checkpoint operations when it started. A TSA officer she didn't recognize, a woman in her 30s named Sandra Chen, according to her badge, had called over to her. Ma'am, you can't stand there." Marlene had been standing to the side of the checkpoint, out of passenger flow, taking notes on her tablet about staffing patterns during the morning rush. "I'm not in anyone's way," Marlene said politely. "You're loitering. You need to either get in line for screening or move back to the public area. I'm observing the checkpoint operations." Sandra's eyes narrowed. "For what purpose?" "Quality assurance." "Are you TSA?" "No, I'm with airport operations." "Airport operations employees wear badges and uniforms." "Not always," Marlene said calmly. "I'm conducting an operational assessment." "Do you have authorization for that?" "Yes." "Can I see it?" Marlene could have pulled out her phone and shown her credentials, could have called her office, could have ended this in 30 seconds. But something made her pause. This was exactly the kind of interaction she needed to understand. How did TSA respond when they didn't recognize someone? What protocols kicked in? How was the communication? "I don't have my physical badge with me," Marlene said, "but I can verify my identity through the operations center." "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back from the checkpoint." "I'm authorized to be here." "Not without proper identification, you're not." Sandra called over another TSA officer, an older black man named Kenneth Davis. "Ken, this woman says she's with airport operations, but she doesn't have credentials." Kenneth looked at Marlene with the weariness of someone who dealt with difficult passengers for 20 years. "Ma'am, if you're with the airport, you know you need to display your badge in secure areas." "I do know that. I'm conducting an unannounced assessment." "Of TSA operations." "Of overall terminal operations, which includes TSA." "And who authorized that?" "I did. I'm Deputy Director of Terminal Operations." Kenneth's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, the Deputy Director is Marlene Thompson, and I've met her. You're not her." Marlene blinked. "Excuse me." "I met Deputy Director Thompson 6 months ago at a staff meeting. She's not you." This is where things shifted. Marlene pulled out her phone. I can show you my ID right now. Ma'am, put the phone away, Sandra said sharply. We don't know what you're accessing. I'm accessing my employee credentials. We have someone claiming to be a senior airport official with no badge, no identification, refusing to follow instructions, Sandra said into her radio. Requesting airport police at checkpoint Delta 7. That's not necessary, Marlene said, keeping her voice calm. I can verify my identity in 2 minutes if you'll just. Ma'am, step away from the checkpoint. Marlene stepped back, but she was starting to feel the first threads of real concern. Kenneth was insisting he'd met her, but Marlene had never met him. She would have remembered. Which meant Kenneth had met someone else, someone who'd claimed to be her. That was a security problem. But before she could process that, 2 airport police officers arrived, the ones who would eventually escort her out. Officer Morrison and his partner, a black woman named Officer Diaz. What's the situation? Morrison asked. Sandra explained. This individual claims to be Deputy Director Thompson, but she has no credentials, no badge, and is refusing to leave a secure area. Morrison looked at Marlene. Ma'am, do you have any identification? I have my driver's license. Marlene pulled it out slowly, hands visible. And I have my employee credentials on my phone. Morrison examined her license. This says Marlene Thompson. Yes. And you're claiming to be the Deputy Director of Terminal Operations. I'm not claiming. I am the Deputy Director. Morrison exchanged a look with Officer Diaz. Ma'am, the Deputy Director would have proper airport credentials. I do. They're in my car. I'm conducting an unannounced operational assessment. That's a pretty convenient story. It's the truth. If you call the operations center and ask for my office, my assistant can verify. Ma'am, we get people every week trying to access secure areas with fake credentials or false identities. I'm going to need you to come with me. I'm not going anywhere until you verify my identity. Ma'am, you can verify your identity at the airport police office. Right now, you're in a secure area without proper credentials, and you're refusing to comply with lawful orders. Marlene felt the situation spiraling. I'm not refusing to comply. I'm trying to explain. You've explained. Now I need you to come with me voluntarily, or I'll have to escort you. Marlene looked at Officer Diaz, who'd been silent this whole time. Officer, please call the operations center. Ask for Helen Martinez. She's my executive assistant. She can confirm my identity. Diaz looked at Morrison, who shook his head slightly. We'll make that call from the office, Morrison said. Let's go. He reached for Marlene's arm. What she didn't realize yet was that 3 passengers had their phones out, recording. Marlene pulled her arm back. Don't touch me. I'll walk with you, but don't put your hands on me. Ma'am, I need you to comply. I am complying. I said I'll walk with you. You don't need to grab me. Morrison's hand hovered near her elbow, not quite touching but making the threat clear. They walked through the checkpoint area, past hundreds of passengers in line, all watching. Marlene kept her head up, her expression neutral. She'd been a black woman in America for 54 years. She knew how this worked. Any sign of anger would be labeled as aggression. Any resistance would be labeled as noncompliance. Any emotion would be used to justify whatever came next. So she stayed calm, visibly calm. But inside, she was running through protocols. How long until someone at the operations center noticed she hadn't checked in? Her morning walkthroughs were informal, but Helen knew her schedule. If Marlene didn't respond to her 7 a.m. check-in text. They reached the airport police substation, a small office tucked behind the security checkpoints. Morrison gestured to a chair. Have a seat. I'd prefer to stand. Sit down, ma'am. Marlene said. Morrison pulled out a form. I need your full name, address, and purpose for being in the secure area. Marlene provided the information calmly, clearly. And you claim to work for the airport. I don't claim. I do work for the airport. Deputy Director of Terminal Operations, reporting to Director Catherine Mills. Morrison wrote it down, his expression skeptical. And you were in the checkpoint area without credentials because I was conducting an unannounced operational assessment. It's standard practice. I do them twice a week. And where's your office? Terminal D, 3rd floor, Operations Wing. And your supervisor is? Catherine Mills, Director of Operations, but she's on vacation in Colorado this week. Her deputy, that's me, is acting director. Morrison was writing everything down, but Marlene could see he didn't believe a word of it. Okay, Ms. Thompson, we're going to verify this information. In the meantime, I need to ask you to wait here. How long will this take? As long as it takes. Officer Diaz finally spoke. Morrison, maybe we should just make the call now, to the operations center. We'll verify everything properly, chain of command. Marlene checked her watch, 6:23 a.m. Helen would try to reach her at 7:00. 37 minutes. But that wasn't the moment that mattered most. Section 4, the call. Morrison left the office, presumably to call his supervisor. Officer Diaz stayed, standing near the door, looking uncomfortable. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Yes. Are you really the deputy director? Yes. Because Ken said he met Marlene Thompson, and you weren't her. I've been thinking about that. When did he meet her? He said 6 months ago, staff meeting. Marlene pulled out her phone and opened her calendar, scrolled back 6 months. Found it. 6 months ago, I was at a conference in Denver. There was a staff meeting I was supposed to attend, but Catherine had someone else run it in my absence. Let me guess. It was about new security protocols. Diaz looked surprised. I think so. That would have been Helen Martinez, my assistant. She's Latina, about 40, professional, very organized. That's who Ken met. So you're saying he met your assistant, not you. And apparently assumed she was me, which tells me something interesting about what people expect a deputy director to look like. Diaz looked away. Marlene continued, her voice still calm. I'm not angry at Ken. He made an honest mistake. But I am concerned that no one in this office has thought to simply call my office to verify my identity before detaining me. Morrison's calling his supervisor. His supervisor will call my supervisor, and my supervisor is in Colorado. By the time this gets sorted through chain of command, I'll have been detained for over an hour. I'm sorry. Don't apologize to me, fix the process. This shouldn't happen to anyone. Diaz shifted her weight. Can I make a suggestion? Please. Give me Helen Martinez's number. I'll call her myself, off the record. Marlene hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. She provided the number. Diaz stepped out to make the call. Marlene sat in the quiet office, looking at the security monitors showing different parts of the terminal. Her terminal, the one she'd worked in for 7 years, improving efficiency by 23%, reducing security wait times by 31%, implementing 3 major safety upgrades. The terminal where she'd personally interviewed and hired 47 employees, including probably half the people currently detaining her. The irony wasn't lost on her. The next decision would change how this ended. Officer Diaz returned, her expression changed. Ms. Thompson, I just spoke with Helen Martinez. She confirmed your identity. She's calling Director Mills right now. Relief washed over Marlene. Thank you. I am so sorry about this. It's not your fault. You followed protocol. Morrison followed protocol. The problem is the protocol has gaps. Morrison returned at that moment, phone in hand, face pale. We need to release her, now. I just told her. Director Mills just called my captain, who called me. Apparently Ms. Thompson is exactly who she says she is, and we've just detained the acting director of operations for over 30 minutes. Marlene stood. I'd like to file a formal incident report. Morrison looked like he might be sick. Ma'am, I am so sorry. I'm not interested in apologies right now. I'm interested in understanding how this happened so we can prevent it from happening again. Of course, absolutely, whatever you need. I need the names of everyone involved. I need the security footage from the checkpoint. And I need a meeting with your captain, TSA management, and my operations team. Today. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Marlene picked up her bag. Where are my belongings? Right here. Diaz handed her the tote she'd been carrying. And I assume I'm free to go. Yes, ma'am. Again, we're very sorry. Save it for the incident review. Marlene walked out of the police substation, back into the terminal. Passengers stared as she passed. Some had clearly seen her being escorted earlier. She walked with her head high, shoulders back, moving through the terminal like she owned it. Because in a very real sense she did. What happened next wasn't loud, but it was decisive. Marlene took the elevator to the third-floor operations wing. Helen Martinez was waiting outside her office, phone in hand, looking frantic. Marlene, oh my God, are you okay? When Director Mills called and said you'd been detained. I'm fine, Helen, but we have a problem. I know, I've been trying to reach you for the last hour. Not that. A bigger problem. 6 months ago, you ran a staff meeting for me while I was at the Denver conference, right? Yes, the security protocol update. And apparently some TSA officers met you that day and assumed you were me. Helen's eyes widened. What? One of the officers who detained me today said he'd met Marlene Thompson 6 months ago. He described you. But I never said I was you. I introduced myself as your assistant. I believe you, but somewhere in that interaction, wires got crossed. And today, when I said I was Marlene Thompson, that officer said I wasn't because I didn't match his memory of who Marlene Thompson was. Helen sat down heavily. This is my fault. It's nobody's fault. It's a system failure, but we need to fix it. What do you need from me? Pull the attendance records from that meeting. I want to know everyone who was there. Pull my calendar for the last year, every meeting, every walk-through, every staff interaction. I want to document how often I'm actually visible to frontline staff. Okay. And call Catherine. She needs to cut her vacation short. She's already on a flight back. She was furious when she heard what happened. Good, set up a meeting for 2 p.m. today. I want TSA management, airport police command staff, and our operations leadership. Conference room A. Done. Marlene walked into her office and sat down at her desk. Her hands were shaking. She'd held it together through the entire ordeal, the questioning, the skepticism, the detention. But now, alone in her office, the weight of it hit her. She'd been detained in her own airport by her own staff. Because she didn't look like what they expected a deputy director to look like. And if it could happen to her, with all her authority, her position, her ability to make phone calls and demand meetings, what happened to regular passengers who got caught in similar situations? She pulled up the incident reporting system on her computer and began typing. At 10 a.m., Marlene met with her security analyst, James Porter, to review the footage. I pulled everything from this morning, James said. Checkpoint Delta 7, airport police substation, and, well, you should probably see this. He pulled up footage of Marlene being escorted through the checkpoint. Passengers stopping, starring, pulling out phones. At least 7 people recorded it. James said quietly, "and 3 have already posted to social media." He showed her the posts. Just watched airport security drag a black woman out of TSA for no reason. She was literally just standing there. This is America. Woman detained at ATL for loitering while white people walk past freely. Same story, different day. Security escorting someone out at Hartsfield. She looked terrified. Anyone know what happened? Marlene watched herself in the footage, watched her careful composure, watched Morrison's hand hovering near her arm. Has anyone identified me in the posts? Not yet, but it's only a matter of time. Let me see the checkpoint footage. Before I was approached. James pulled it up. There was Marlene standing to the side, tablet in hand, observing the flow. She looked exactly like a regular passenger, maybe a business traveler, someone waiting for a colleague. Nothing threatening, nothing suspicious. Just a black woman existing in space. Now show me footage from the same time period, other people standing around. James pulled up multiple angles. There, a white man in a suit, standing in almost the same spot Marlene had been, also on his phone. No one approached him. There, a white woman with a roller bag, stationary for nearly 5 minutes while she reorganized her belongings. No one told her to move. There, an Asian businessman, clearly lost, standing in the flow of traffic while he checked his phone for directions. A TSA officer politely directed him, nothing more. Pull the data for me, Marlene said. Last 6 months, how many people were detained at checkpoints for loitering or suspicious behavior? Break it down by race and gender. James looked uncomfortable. Marlene, are you sure you want to? Yes, I need to know if what happened to me is an anomaly or a pattern. I'll have it by this afternoon. This is where the tone changed. The data James compiled was damning. In the last 6 months, 47 people had been detained at TSA checkpoints for loitering or suspicious behavior. 31 were black, 66%. 39 were people of color overall, 83%. Average detention time for white passengers, 12 minutes. Average detention time for black passengers, 34 minutes. Marlene stared at the numbers. She'd spent 7 years improving operational efficiency. And she'd completely missed this. There's more, James said quietly. I pulled complaint data. In the last year, we've had 73 formal complaints from passengers about being profiled, questioned, or detained without cause. 68 of those complaints were from people of color. How many were resolved in favor of the passenger? 4. The rest were dismissed as unfounded or procedural confusion. Marlene felt sick. One more thing, James said. I pulled staff diversity data. TSA officers at this terminal 67% white. Airport police 71% white. Operations management 82% white. He paused. You're one of 3 black people in senior leadership across the entire airport. Marlene had known she was often the only black woman in meetings, but seeing the numbers laid out like this. This goes in the incident report, she said, all of it. Marlene, this could create a lot of blowback. Good, it should. At 2 p.m., conference room A was packed. Catherine Mills had made it back from Colorado, looking exhausted and furious. TSA's regional security director, Marcus Webb, was there with 3 of his managers. Airport Police Chief Ronald Davis and his 2 captains. Marlene's operations team. And legal representation from both TSA and the airport authority. Catherine opened the meeting. Let's be clear about what happened this morning. My deputy director, the woman who runs operations for this terminal, was detained by security for over 30 minutes because no one believed she was who she said she was. Marcus Webb cleared his throat. Director Mills, I want to apologize on behalf of TSA. This was a clear breakdown in. "I'm not finished," Catherine said. "Marlene is going to walk us through what happened, and then we're going to talk about why it happened, and then we're going to talk about how we make damn sure it never happens again." She nodded to Marlene. Marlene stood and walked through the timeline, calmly, factually. The officers' faces grew more uncomfortable with each detail. Then she pulled up the data James had compiled. "This isn't about one incident," she said. "This is about a pattern, and that pattern tells me we have a serious problem with how we're training staff, how we're monitoring interactions, and who we're targeting for additional scrutiny." She showed the detention statistics, the complaint data, the demographic breakdown. The room was silent. "I want to be very clear," Marlene continued. "I am not interested in punishing the individual officers involved in my detention. They followed their training. They followed procedure. The problem is that the training and procedure are inadequate." "What are you suggesting?" Ronald Davis asked. "I'm suggesting we implement mandatory bias training for all security personnel. I'm suggesting we create an independent review process for detention complaints. I'm suggesting we track demographic data on all security interactions and make it public. And I'm suggesting we diversify hearing at every level." "That's a significant undertaking," Marcus Webb said. "Yes, it is, but it's necessary." One of the TSA managers spoke up. "With all due respect, Ms. Thompson, one incident doesn't necessarily indicate systemic. Did you look at the data I just presented?" "Yes, but correlation doesn't. I was detained in my own terminal, in my own airport, by my own staff, because I'm a black woman who didn't match their mental image of what a deputy director looks like. If that can happen to me, with all my authority and resources, what do you think is happening to regular passengers?" Silence. Catherine spoke again. "Here's what's going to happen. Marlene is leading a complete review of our security interaction protocols. She has my full support and full authority. You will cooperate fully. Any questions?" No one spoke. "Good, meeting adjourned. Marlene, my office." In Catherine's office, the director poured 2 cups of coffee and handed one to Marlene. "How are you really?" "Honestly, I'm angry, and I'm tired, and I'm questioning whether I want to keep doing this job." Catherine nodded. "I wouldn't blame you if you walked away. What happened this morning was inexcusable. But I also know that if you walk away, nothing changes. The next person in your position won't have your knowledge or your authority to push for reform. So I should stay and fix the system that just failed me. I'm saying you're the only person I trust to do it right." Marlene was quiet for a long moment. "I want full authority to overhaul security interaction protocols. I want budget for bias training. I want authority to hire an independent consultant to audit our practices. And I want a commitment that will publish the demographic data quarterly." "You have all of that. And if I get pushback from TSA or airport police?" "You have my backing, and I'll escalate to the airport authority board if necessary." Marlene took a sip of coffee. "Okay, I'll do it." "Thank you. But Catherine, if this doesn't work, if 6 months from now we're still seeing the same patterns, I'm out." Fair enough. What she didn't realize yet was that someone was about to make this very public. 2 days later, Marlene was in a meeting when Helen knocked on the door, looking panicked. "You need to see this." She pulled up Twitter on the conference room screen. The video from the checkpoint had gone viral. Not the passenger videos, those had gotten some traction. But someone had leaked the security footage. High-quality, multi-angle footage showing the entire interaction. Marlene being questioned, being told to leave, being escorted through the checkpoint by 2 officers. The caption, "Atlanta Airport Deputy Director detained by her own security staff." She told them who she was. They didn't believe her. 3.2 million views in 6 hours. The comments were a mix of outrage, solidarity, and skepticism. This is what we mean when we talk about implicit bias. They really detained their own boss and still didn't believe her. Why didn't she just show her ID? She shouldn't have to. She told them who she was. This is America. Black people aren't allowed to just exist in spaces. Marlene watched the footage of herself maintaining composure while being escorted out. She looked dignified, calm, controlled. But she also looked scared. Because she had been. Her phone started ringing, media requests. Helen set up a press conference, tomorrow 10 a.m. Are you sure? We were going to have to address this eventually. Better to control the narrative. The press conference room was packed. Marlene stood at the podium, Catherine Mills beside her, with legal and PR support in the background. Good morning. My name is Marlene Thompson. I'm the Deputy Director of Terminal Operations here at Hartsfield-Jackson. 2 days ago, I was detained by airport security while conducting a routine operational assessment. I'd like to address what happened and what we're doing about it. She walked through the timeline, acknowledged the officers followed procedure, acknowledged she could have handled it differently. But here's what I want to focus on. Why did this happen? Why, when I told multiple officers that I was the deputy director, did no one believe me? Why did it take 37 minutes to verify my identity when a simple phone call could have resolved it in 2 minutes? She paused. The answer is uncomfortable, but it's true. I didn't match their mental image of what a deputy director looks like, and that assumption, that unconscious bias, led to my detention. Now, I have the authority and resources to address what happened to me, but I keep thinking about all the passengers who have had similar experiences and didn't have that power. This morning's incident wasn't unique. It was just unusually visible. She pulled up the demographic data on the screen behind her. This is 6 months of detention data from our checkpoints. You can see the disparities clearly, and these numbers tell me we have work to do. So here's what we're implementing immediately. She outlined the reforms: training, oversight, data transparency, independent review. These changes won't happen overnight, but they will happen, because what happened to me cannot happen to anyone else. Questions came fast. Are you suing the airport? No, I'm fixing the airport. Will the officers involved be fired? No, they'll receive additional training. This isn't about punishment, it's about systemic change. Do you think racism played a role? I think implicit bias played a role. And whether you call that racism or unconscious prejudice or assumptions based on stereotypes, the impact is the same. People of color are being targeted for additional scrutiny at higher rates than white passengers. That needs to change. After the press conference, Marlene's phone exploded with messages. Support from colleagues, interview requests, speaking invitations. And one message that made her pause. From Officer Morrison. Ms. Thompson, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I've been thinking a lot about what happened. I'd like to apologize in person if you're willing, and I'd like to be part of the solution. Marlene stared at the message for a long time. Then she replied, come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Officer Morrison arrived at 8:57 a.m. looking nervous. Marlene gestured for him to sit. I'm sorry to take up your time, ma'am. I just wanted to say, in person, how sorry I am for what happened. I made assumptions I shouldn't have made, and I let those assumptions guide my actions. What assumptions? That you didn't look like a deputy director. That your story about conducting an unannounced assessment sounded convenient. That you were probably lying. Why did you assume that? Morrison was quiet for a moment. Because, honestly, because I've dealt with people trying to scam their way into secure areas, and I jumped to that conclusion without properly investigating. And do you think you would have jumped to that conclusion if I were white? I don't know. I want to say yes because I'd like to think I treat everyone the same, but watching the video back, I don't think I would have. Why not? Because I've seen white people in similar situations and I give them more benefit of the doubt. I verify more carefully. I'm less quick to assume they're lying. Marlene appreciated his honesty. Here's what I need from you, Officer Morrison. I need you to be honest about this. In training sessions, with your colleagues, when you see other officers making the same assumptions you made. I can do that. And I need you to understand something. You following your training is exactly why I'm changing the training. Because if good officers following procedure still end up detaining their own leadership, the procedure is broken. Morrison nodded. I agree, and I want to help fix it. Good. Then you're going to be part of the pilot program for the new training. And I'm going to use your case as an example, with your permission, of how implicit bias shows up even in well-meaning people. You have my permission. After he left, Marlene sat quietly. This is where things shifted. Over the next 6 months, Marlene oversaw the most comprehensive security training overhaul in the airport's history. She brought in Dr. Jennifer Washington, an expert in implicit bias and law enforcement training. Together, they developed scenarios based on real interactions, including Marlene's. Every TSA officer, every airport police officer, every security staff member went through the training. It wasn't passive, it wasn't lectures. It was role-playing, data analysis, uncomfortable conversations. Officers watched footage of their own interactions and identified bias. They analyzed demographic data and confronted disparities. They practiced verification procedures that didn't rely on assumptions. Marlene attended every session. Some officers were defensive, some resentful, but many were genuinely trying to understand. In one session, Officer Kenneth Davis, the one who'd insisted he'd met Marlene before, stood up. I owe Ms. Thompson an apology. I met her assistant 6 months ago, and I assumed the assistant was her because the assistant matched what I expected a deputy director to look like, and Ms. Thompson didn't. What did you expect? Dr. Washington asked gently. I don't know, someone older, more formal, someone who looked more authoritative. Someone white. Kenneth hesitated. Maybe. I don't like thinking I have those biases, but watching this training, I can't deny them anymore. Marlene spoke up. Ken, the fact that you're recognizing this now is what matters. Bias isn't about being a bad person. It's about having patterns in your thinking that you've never examined. Now you're examining them. That's growth. 6 months after the incident, Marlene published the first quarterly demographic report. The numbers showed improvement. Detentions for loitering down 42%. Average detention time for black passengers down from 34 minutes to 19 minutes. Complaints about profiling down 31%. Staff completing bias training 94%. It wasn't perfect, there were still disparities. But the trend was moving in the right direction. And more importantly, the data was now public. Passengers could see it. Media could track it. Accountability was built in. Marlene also published response data. Complaints resolved in favor of passenger, up from 4% to 38%. Time to resolve complaints, down from 45 days to 12 days. Independent review panel established, with community representation. The media coverage was extensive. Some praised the airport's transparency. Some criticized the changes as not enough. Some questioned whether the data was accurate. But everyone was talking about it. And other airports started calling, asking how to implement similar programs. 9 months after the incident, Marlene received an unexpected call. It was from the Transportation Security Administration's national headquarters. They wanted her to lead a task force on equity in airport security. "We've been watching what you've done in Atlanta," the deputy administrator said. "It's exactly the kind of systemic approach we need nationwide." "I'm honored, but I'm also busy running operations here." "We know. That's why we're proposing a 6-month detail. You'd maintain your position at Atlanta, but spend 3 days a week working with our team to develop national standards." Marlene thought about it. 6 months ago, she'd been detained in her own terminal. Now she was being asked to reshape security policy for every airport in the country. "I need to talk to Catherine Mills. If she approves, I'm in." Catherine not only approved, she insisted. "This is your chance to make sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else at any airport. You have to do this." So Marlene did. The National Task Force included representatives from TSA, major airports, civil rights organizations, and community advocates. Marlene chaired it. They spent 6 months developing recommendations. Mandatory bias training for all TSA officers, with regular refreshers. Standardized protocols for verifying passenger credentials and responding to questions. Demographic data collection and public reporting at all major airports. Independent review panels for discrimination complaints. Community oversight boards at major hubs. Recruitment initiatives to diversify TSA and airport security staff. The recommendations were released in a 200-page report that made national news. Some airports embraced it immediately. Others pushed back, citing costs and operational concerns. But the conversation had fundamentally changed. Before Marlene's detention, bias in airport security was something activists talked about but institutions denied. Now it was something everyone acknowledged needed to be addressed. 1 year after her detention, Marlene stood in the same checkpoint where it had happened. The airport was honoring her, with a plaque recognizing her leadership in security reform. It felt surreal. She looked around at the TSA officers working the checkpoint. Several she recognized from the incident and the subsequent training. Sandra Chen, who'd first questioned her, approached. "Ms. Thompson, I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For not getting me fired, for using what happened to actually make things better, for teaching us instead of just punishing us." "You were doing your job, Sandra. You just needed better training to do it right." "Still, I've learned a lot this year about my own biases, about how my assumptions affect people. I'm trying to do better." That's all any of us can do. After the ceremony, Marlene walked through the terminal. Her terminal. The one that had detained her, the one she'd transformed. She passed passengers of all backgrounds moving through security without incident. She saw TSA officers checking credentials carefully, respectfully. She saw data monitors showing real-time demographic information about security interactions. It wasn't perfect. Bias didn't disappear overnight. But it was better. And it was going to keep getting better. Because Marlene Thompson hadn't just filed a complaint and moved on. She turned her worst professional moment into a catalyst for systemic change. Not just for herself. For everyone. 18 months after the incident, Marlene received a call from an unknown number. A woman's voice shaking. "Is this Marlene Thompson, the deputy director who was detained at Atlanta?" "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Angela Morris. I'm a flight attendant, and I was just detained at O'Hare. They didn't believe I work for the airline. I've been here for 2 hours and no one will listen to me." "Are you still in custody?" "Yes, they said I can make one call. I called you because I saw what you did, and I need help." Marlene's mind raced. "Angela, listen carefully. Do you have your employee credentials?" "Yes, but they say they look fake." "Okay, ask to speak to the airport operations director. Use my name. Tell them I can verify your identity. Give them my direct number. They won't listen. They will if you invoke a federal task force investigation. Tell them I'm the chair of the TSA Equity Task Force and that I'm personally aware of your situation. That will get their attention. Okay, thank you. Angela, after they release you, call me back. We need to document this. I will. Marlene hung up and immediately called the operations director at O'Hare. Tom, this is Marlene Thompson in Atlanta. I just got a call from one of your passengers, a flight attendant being detained. I need you to verify her credentials immediately and release her. Marlene, I'm not sure I can just. Tom, she's being held without cause. Same thing that happened to me. You've read my task force report. You know the new protocols. Follow them. I'll look into it. Don't look into it. Fix it now and call me back in 10 minutes. 9 minutes later, Tom called back. You're right. She's exactly who she says she is. We're releasing her and filing an incident report. Good, send me that report. I want to see if this is a pattern. After hanging up, Marlene realized something. Her detention hadn't just changed Atlanta. It had created a network. A way for people who experienced similar treatment to know they weren't alone. A system for holding airports accountable. A precedent that said these incidents wouldn't be swept under the rug anymore. That mattered more than any award or recognition. 2 years after her detention, Marlene was promoted to Director of Operations for Hartsfield-Jackson. Catherine Mills retired, and the Airport Authority Board unanimously selected Marlene as her successor. At her first staff meeting in her new role, Marlene looked around the room. It was more diverse than it had been 2 years ago, not perfect but better. She saw Officer Morrison, now promoted to sergeant and leading bias training initiatives. She saw Sandra Chen, who become an advocate for better TSA protocols. She saw Kenneth Davis, who'd retired but volunteered with the Community Oversight Board. And she saw 3 new faces, Black women she'd personally recruited into leadership positions. Before we start, Marlene said, I want to tell you a story about the day I was detained in this terminal. She walked through it again, not as trauma but as a case study. I share this not to embarrass anyone or to center my own experience. I share it because it illustrates something important. Systems don't fail once. They fail over and over until someone forces them to change. 2 years ago, this airport detained me because I didn't look like what people expected a deputy director to look like. Today, we're implementing protocols that make that kind of bias visible and actionable. But the work isn't done. It's never done. Every day we have to choose to be better, to see our blind spots, to listen when people tell us about problems we don't see. That's what I'm asking from all of you, not perfection, just awareness and action. The room was quiet. Then Officer Morrison spoke up. Director Thompson, thank you for giving us the chance to do better, for not giving up on us. Marlene smiled. I didn't give up on you. I just refused to accept a system that failed me and fails too many other people. If you want to thank me, keep doing the work. Marlene Thompson was detained in her own terminal by her own staff, who didn't believe she could be who she said she was. Because she was a Black woman in a position of authority, and that didn't match their expectations. She could have filed a lawsuit. She could have demanded firings. She could have walked away from an airport that had failed her. Instead, she did something harder. She stayed. She documented everything. She built a coalition of people willing to change. She created systems that made bias visible. She trained officers to recognize their assumptions. She published data that held everyone accountable. And she turned her worst professional moment into a blueprint for reform that spread across the country. 2 years later, Detention incidents based on profiling were down 64% at Atlanta and 41% nationwide at airports that had implemented her protocols. Thousands of passengers were moving through security with more dignity. Hundreds of officers were thinking more carefully about their assumptions. Dozens of airports were publishing demographic data and being held accountable. Because Marlene Thompson didn't just want justice for herself. She wanted justice for everyone. She ran the terminal. But more than that, she ran toward the problem instead of away from it. She transformed humiliation into accountability. She converted anger into action. She changed not just what happened to her, but what would happen to others. That's not revenge. That's leadership. The kind that doesn't need to raise its voice. Because the work speaks for itself. Power isn't about never being knocked down. It's about what you build when you get back up. She was detained, dismissed, and doubted. But she didn't just clear her name. She changed the system that questioned it. That's the difference between being right and being effective. Between winning once and winning for everyone. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. And 2 years later, thousands of people were walking through airports with dignity they didn't even know someone had fought for. That's legacy. Quiet, patient, transformative. The kind that lasts.